those items in your gift bags today. So all the swag you have is based off of the Latino members, Latino Chambers members, and the Pueblo City County Library District. So thank you. And for the library staff to help fill them. So today is my honor to introduce to you Matt Garcia. Matt Garcia is a very important person here at the university. His artistic practice investigates systems of ecology, their relationships to knowledge, and how native ecologies can connect communities to reclaiming or reimagining of lost epistemologies. His work emphasizes how environmental art can cultivate belonging, empowerment, and cultural resistance. Garcia is founder and creative director of DesertArtLAB, an interdisciplinary environmental arts collaborative established in 2010. Since its inception, DesertArtLAB has explored the intersections of art, ecology, and community engagement, centering Indigenous, Chicanx perspectives on ecological practice, food sovereignty, self-determination, and climate change. DesertArtLAB's projects activate public space through participatory artworks and support the restoration of desert environments and their foodways through zero irrigation regrowth projects. Garcia's work has been presented nationally and internationally at venues including the Museum of Contemporary Native Art, MACNA in Santa Fe, New Mexico, Galería de la Raza, San Francisco, California, École Nationale Supérieure des Beaux-Arts in Paris, France, and the Dawn Museum in Vienna, Austria, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Santa Barbara, the New Mexico Museum of Art, Latin Contemporary Santa Fe, New Mexico, the Balance Unbalanced Festival in Noosa, Australia, and Aztlán, Lima, Peru, and many more. Matt is a 2016 Creative Capital Awardee in Emerging Fields and was a 2021 Mellon Artist in Residence at the Colorado College Fine Arts Museum. He lives and works here in Pueblo, where he is currently an Associate Professor of Art and Creative Media and the Chicano Studies Program Coordinator at Colorado State University Pueblo. Help me welcome Matt Garcia.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank the Aztlán Center, Rose, April Ortiz, Charlene. A lot of folks put a lot in to make this happen, and as a faculty member, we're very proud of what everybody's able to bring here and the collection of thinkers we're able to share with the community. So I'm going to present on my practice, and Maria did a great job. Thank you, Maria. Maria did a great job at introducing it. The organization, I'm a faculty member here, as she explained. I'm a Chicano Studies Coordinator, but I'm going to share a project called DesertArtLAB, which is a part of my artistic practice. And it's the work I was doing even before I became a faculty member here at CSU Pueblo. So it's a kind of a journey that I'll take you through that kind of explores a different kind of practice. And one of the things I want to do is kind of contextualize the kind of work that I do. And when we think about art, there's a lot of things that come into your mind. And sometimes this style of art that I'm going to share isn't really one at the top of the list, but it is a section of the contemporary art field that I work in and that my work kind of has discussions with. And one of the areas that I wanted to So our work, another thing is April Bojorquez is involved, is a part of DesertArtLAB. So she also is, and has been, like I said, we've been doing this project for probably about a decade. And so she's an instrumental thinker and creative in the work that is produced through DesertArtLAB. DesertArtLAB, the idea conceptually is influenced by art and design movements such as land art. So these are areas of the contemporary art field. Land art, socially engaged art, and fluxus art. So these, and I really you see the kind of work we do, it's really influenced by these concepts of creative practice. Land art. Land art is made, I'm going to do a little definition of each. Land art is can be made directly into a landscape by sculpting the land itself or making structures in a landscape with natural materials. Land art is also known as earth art. It was part of a wider conceptual art movement in the 1960s and 70s. It was established by a group of pioneering artists who investigated natural sites, alternative modes of artistic production, and ways to circumvent the commercial art system. So in a lot of ways, they were resisting the idea that art is all about commodity, buying and selling of objects. And another type of art that influences our practice is called fluxism, fluxus art. A very interdisciplinary art movement that had different kinds of creatives, artists, composers, designers, poets. And fluxus art was characterized by blurring and challenging the lines between everyday life and art. A leading figure in the fluxus art movement, George Menchunas, once said, "Fluxus is a way of living and dying." And this kind of art, as I was a student of art, these things were influencing these ideas. Socially engaged practice. This would be what you would call kind of like art and activism. So sometimes it's very politically charged, it has a political direction, it has a lot of community engagement. It's not like stuff hanging on walls, it's really getting into a community and trying to create a discussion. Sometimes make a difference, but sometimes just open up a dialogue about an issue that an artist isn't interested in. So I'm going to show you some examples of work from these type of kind of work that's really honored and respected in these fields. One of them is called Wheat Field, a Confrontation, and this was done in Battery Park when there was a landfill there in downtown Manhattan. And what this artist did, Agnes Dennis, in 1982, she grew a wheat field right next to the World Trade Center towers, and this was her art project. It was an attempt to kind of have this conversation about power and food and commodity. And this, for me as a young artist, I was like, well, artists can do that. That's pretty cool. That's art. And it was. This was all funded by arts institutions. This is a revered piece in contemporary art, and she is a very influential figure in the field. And then here's another. This one's called Lightning Fields. This one's in New Mexico, not too far from here. In fact, New Mexico in the Southwest has a large collection of land art. It's probably the biggest in the world. People come from all over the world to see this stuff. And this one is an array of 400 silver rods in the deserts of New Mexico. To visit this, you have to book, it's like a 2-day stay is required. And the idea is, if you catch it on the right time of day, you will see these 400 rods illuminated by electricity, light on. And this is the art. This is another really kind of monumental piece in the field. I could go on forever, but as a student, these were influencing me. But I was also being influenced by scholarship around topics that I was interested in. And I want to share that. Mexico Profundo. This is a text that really challenges this idea of mestizaje. And for me, that woke me up. I was like, well, this is cool, this is interesting, because coming from the kind of Chicano, scholarship, that was such a big part of what was always discussed, mestizaje. Well, this right here said something else. And I thought it was so exciting, and it is. I would recommend, if you haven't checked this out, please do. But it influenced me as an artist. Another text, Enrique Salmon's Eating the Landscape. This researcher brought in this concept that was just so exciting as an artist and as somebody who was engaging in these topics of land art and socially engaged art, and he called it kincentric ecologies. This idea that we are like ancestrally connected to the land in a way that's just not just about knowing it, but we're a part of it. Really excellent text. And then Dylan Mider's work. This kind of like philosophical approach to Aztlán, not just as territory, but as thinking and living. And again, remember the fluxus, life was art. I was an art student, life is art. So this stuff was all starting to connect. But then when I dug into, land art and these socially engaged art, I often found myself asking, where's our story? You have New Mexico here that has all this land art. People come from all over the world, but where is the Chicano experience in this? Where is the Mexican American experience? Where is the indigenous experience in this art? I didn't see it. Where's our story? Where's our place? Where's our identity? And so that, as an artist, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to dig into that. And where I started with this project was in Phoenix, Arizona. Just an abyss of suburbs that kind of go on forever. The kind of recreation economy, the Sun Belt, the Fiesta Bowl, golfing. But, where I was in a place like this. It was in central Phoenix. 50% of it was stripped vacant land. And when you think about 115 degrees in an urban core like this, it's a wasteland. But we knew there was something more. There was this ecology there. The Sonoran Desert, one of the most biodiverse regions in the world. So, my question as an artist is, how did we get here? How did we get to this? When we have this ecological space. And so as my art practice developed, I wanted to have a conversation about that. And it started with these vacant space planting performances, where April and I would get native ecology and plant it in those vacant spaces that you saw. And these were seen as just performance projects. It was kind of the solo effort against this post-industrial, colonized, stripped landscape. And I would share them. As an artist, you share your work. You go to galleries, you share them. And folks would come up to me and they'd say, I want to plant a cactus. And I thought, well, I didn't expect that. I want to plant one of those. How do I plant one? Can you show me? And I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna kind of thinking about this practice. How do we respond to the community? And of course, I'm an artist, so I had an art show. And in this art show, there was stacks of prickly pear cactus, nopalito cactus, one of the biggest art spaces in central Phoenix to this day. And all I asked the audience that came in to see an art show, as they do on First Fridays around the country, this was one of those spaces, 30,000 people probably went through it at that time. Everybody was able to take a cactus with them. All I asked is that they did their own performance of planting it in vacant urban space in central Phoenix. And then I asked that they send it to me and I would tag it and create this like, geotagged map of it. And they did. So these were kind of the images, and these folks I didn't know. These were the images that came through that process. People had their families doing it, they made maps from it. It was participatory. And then I created a geocode map. In Phoenix, you can still go visit these sites and see if they're alive. And the idea was that, well, this is native ecology, right? If we plant it, it will live. It's in its environment. That was how do we track it? How do we see what journey it has? And this was an image of one of the plantings a couple of years later. Now, of course, this isn't, you're talking 120 degrees, 115 degrees. People think nothing lives there, right? It's a wasteland. Well, and this was challenging that. Well, how could that live? Nobody watered it. Some of the most difficult places people would assume for life to live, but it's not. It wasn't, if you planted the right thing, right? So as these projects grew, we got invited to do more projects in the community, and there was a nonprofit organization in one of these communities with a lot of vacant space, and they wanted to do a community garden, but in central Phoenix, in 115 degrees in the summer, community gardens are difficult. And they asked us if we had any ideas, and we said, yes, let's do a mass cacti planting performance in this vacant lot that was donated to their community organization. And they said, let's do it. So we had probably 200 folks there, help create this huge grid of prickly pear cactus in this vacant lot in urban Phoenix, predominantly Chicano and Mexican neighborhoods. And we called it Fields to Freedom. So once this project was completed, the day of, we were kind of like, wow, that worked out real well. And I kid you not, like a Mercedes-Benz pulls up, hops the curb, guy gets out and said, what are you doing here? And I was like, oh, I'm working with this community organization, and they knew him. And he was like, no, I know you all. He's like, get this cactus off my land. Like, I don't want to hear. They tried to explain it to him. He's like, I don't care what you're doing. I don't want cactus in my space. And so that opened up the discussion as artists, because we were like, oh wow, indigenous ecology is gone, it's stripped, but it's also stigmatized. It's hated. Oh, hated. And so, of course, we didn't remove it. We were like, oh, we're out of here. Now, of course, this is all different now. This was a time when these vacant lots were all being prospected. So there's like a mid-rise on this lot right now. And that community's gone. The community is gone. It's not there anymore. Yeah, fills the free. But this started to also get us to look into what it meant to be a dry land in the desert. And so our DesertArtLAB kind of model started to spread outside of Phoenix, started to spread outside of the outside of that desert. And we started kind of researching what are the issues around the Southwest, and what we found is they're very similar. And this map right here was another kind of piece of research that really changed our perspective on how we looked at where we were in the Southwest. And this is John Wesley Powell's map of the arid regions of the United States, 1890. So after the U.S. and Mexico fought a war, the Southwest became part of Mexico, part of the U.S., and the U.S. spent a few decades trying to figure out what they got, you know. And Wesley Powell went and did research, and he came back to Congress and he says, you have a big desert. Like, you can't, that's what you have over there. And this map is really beautiful. This is in basically a proposal to Congress that's in books. UC Boulder has one in their library. It's really nice. And, you know, basically they said, you gotta be very careful with what you do. And what was cool about this is they divided the land in watersheds. So you can see it's not states, as we know the square states, it's watersheds. So there was there was a proposal right at the beginning of kind of digging into the Southwest where water had to be centered. Acknowledgement of dry lands had to be centered. Obviously it had been for generations, right? But so then once those maps came out there, you know, things started to, as this part of the country started to open up to, you know, colonization from the United States, they started to, you know, label parts of the Southwest. And this area that we're in for a very long time is called the Great American Desert. And if you look, you can see the Arkansas River in there, right in the middle. This is another one. So again, and so then as we dig into this as artists, we kind of thought, well, what's, you know, well, I'll get into it later, but what's a desert? And what's that label mean? And what does it mean in this political construct that we're exploring? Other maps that influenced our work. The final U.S.-Mexico border before the invasion into this part of the country. So you can see the border of Mexico and the U.S. is up here on the Arkansas River at one point, and that's where we're at in Pueblo. This is a map of demographic data, and you can see the darker oranges are a higher concentration of Mexican Americans, and it kind of goes right up to that border. So like the cultural border, even though the political borders changed, the cultural borders are still there. You know? And we, you know, being in southern Colorado, we all know that, right? When you go on your way up to Colorado Springs and you cross into that area, it's a whole other culture. And if you go up there, you'll be sure you're told that, right? This is another map this is a map of this kind of mythological line, the 100 meridian, and it's kind of this line that divides the U.S. between arid lands and lands with moisture. And when we say arid, it means land that takes irrigation to grow food. And so this line was this kind of mythological line that said, on this side you don't need irrigation, on this side you do. Of course, there's little pockets that are different and change as you look through these little concentrations of water and precipitation as you look through it. Of course, the Pacific Northwest is a little different, but you look right where we're at in southern Colorado and that Arkansas River, it's pretty dry. It's extremely dry. This is always a fun video to share. Oh. watch that line. This is research that was done a few years ago out of Yale, and they visualized the research, but you can see the 100th meridian, that line that divides between arid lands of the U.S. and more moisture. It's expanding eastward. See that? So the desert is expanding. Oh no, right? Uh-oh. But for DesertArtLAB, we were like, this is our time, right? This is our time to get in line with that indigenous dryland knowledge. It's more important than ever as these expand. So as an artist, the response was to create an ecological land art installation as an edible landscape on degraded arid land. And so that was what I was looking for. I didn't actually live in Pueblo, Colorado at the time that I wanted to do this. So I wasn't sure where I was going to do it. I was like, I got to find a place to do it. Where am I going to do it? Well, there's really dry lands in Pueblo, Colorado. So that was, and I'm from here. So this was kind of like, this was my site, our site. Through this process, we got support from an organization called Creative Capital that funds weird art like this. and that's why I really wanted to contextualize this, because April and I go all over the country talking about this work, but we're usually in art spaces that they're bringing us in because we're doing socially engaged art or land art. But this is a big section of art, and there actually is a lot of support for it out there in the world. It's kind of hard to believe, but it's pretty cool that there is. So they help support this idea. And Creative Capital is one of those organizations, you got to think really big to get their support. It's got to be like, kind of like they're like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And then you might get support. And that was our idea. It's like, we wanted to find the most degraded piece of land we could and try to return indigenous high desert ecology to it. It wasn't that difficult to find in Pueblo, believe it or not. It didn't take us too long. We found a piece of a plot, and if you look at this, the lot we have is actually the road. So the land that we found was a road for probably generations, and there's nothing more degraded than that. It's getting driven on every day. And so this was just kind of a visual of the original. So with Creative Capital support, we spent the summer getting it ready for our installation. We had a fellowship. We actually had a couple CSUP students help. I wasn't working at this university yet. It was another one. We had a couple CSUP students actually help spend the summer there, helping us kind of survey the land, figure out what it is, pretty much record what was there, because we knew it was going to change. We had the land blessed by our local indigenous elders. Some folks in this meeting here were a part of this, Junior and his family. That was the first cactus we planted right there, is the little boy there. And then this was just the process of installing the first wave of planting, which was cholla cactus, and I'll get into why cholla cactus. But as this practice developed, part of this kind of artistic practice is a rejection of formal space. So if you get into this kind of art and you read about it and you study it, so much of the artists are like, they don't want to be in museums, they don't want to be in the formal space. This is a way to get out of it. But of course, then they ask you to have a show. And so then we had to kind of figure out, well, how do we keep our practice going, but also continue to have our work exhibited in formal space? And this was one of, this is kind of like remnants from the site. This is the stuff that we kind of, the artifacts that we excavated from the base level of work. This is, finally a Google image came out showing the image about 5 years into it. It took about 5 years. I checked like once a week for 5 years. This is the site probably 2 years in. You can see it's mainly cholla, and there's a reason. So the site we didn't bring soil in, it was just hard, it was rock. And in fact, to get these cholla into the earth, we had to get tractors. And I don't know if anybody knows what an auger is, but it's a big drill bit on a big tractor. We broke a couple augers. And so I went back to the rental place here in Pueblo, and I kind of, they were like, what are you doing with this, man? You know, like, these don't break. And I told them, they're like, oh, okay, you need a jackhammer. And so sure enough, that's what we had to do to get these plants into the earth. We had to jackhammer the earth. These plants all came from other cholla in the community. So they're all cuttings. They're cuttings from other cactus in the community. And anybody who knows Pueblo, you know cholla. They're everywhere, right? They're around us. They're in our community. So you can see this is this kind of as they grow. But because there was no soil, we couldn't plant anything else. So this was the key. That first wave of planting had to be cholla because nothing else would grow in that. There was no soil. Believe it or not, we're in the 9th year of this. There's soil now. So 3 years ago, we were able to start adding native shortgrass. So if the site now, I don't have a picture of it, but the site now it's in its 3rd year of native shortgrass, which is, it's just beautiful. If you go to it, you'll be like, they cut the grass, but it's like, it's intentional. It's a part of reestablishing that system. And also shrubs, but we couldn't do that until the cholla got in. The cholla are an incredible plant in that they endure some of the most extreme conditions here. You're talking, Pueblo's very hot, right? Pueblo's very cold, no water, and they're in earth as hard as rock. And they have roots that are like fibers, and they can break up the earth, and they return organic material to it. So there's a healing going on. There's a change underneath the things you can't see in the soil. It's becoming healthy from the cholla. And now, because of that, we have soil, and we're able to plant other plants in the site. So, why cactus? And this is, I spoke a little bit about it. But the history of cactus in the Americas is a wonderful, amazing history. I mean, it's a source of mythology, medicine, intoxicant. There was a researcher at University of South Florida who'd always been told by her grandmother that it cleans water. And she became a scientist. She got a National Science Foundation grant, and she researched it, and it does. It's a super plant. It's tied to like the human success in the Americas, the indigenous success in the Americas, the cactus. So that's why we chose the cactus. It was a metaphor not just for the Americas, but for us, especially the cholla. People hate it, but it's the one thing we need to fix our ecological system. So that was the challenge. And so the location of the site is in central Pueblo. It's in the old part of Pueblo. It's not out in the wilderness or out in the prairies. It's in the center of town, and that was also intentional. This should be a conversation that's happening in our communities. Land art is a very exclusive kind of work where it's normally in the most affluent cities in the world. It's not usually in the rural, working class communities, and that was also why we chose to do it here. But it's also edible. It's a food. It's a food source. Even cholla, believe it or not, even cholla. So that was always the intention, is to engage the food practice. And it's tied to the mythology of the Americas. Tenochtitlan, the very name, is interpreted as place of cactus, place of prickly pear cactus, the ancient sacred city. So again, when we start getting into the stories of the Americas, these things are our guide. They were for us as artists. So I got into the cholla a little bit. So the other part of this project is when I go and speak to my art community, we're in the 9th year of a 30-year project. So when we think about art, usually it's like, oh, the painting's done, or the design's done, or this is a third of the way done. So, and I mean, 5 years ago, I would say, you're just like kind of watching the first 10 or 15 minutes of the movie. Now we're like you're a third way through, so it's actually, there's something to see there. But for the first like 5 years, there was nothing. It was rocks, and that was the point. It changes, though. Every year it changes, and that's kind of part of the project. Native short grasses I wanted want to show you some photos of this native shortgrass. We had to establish all these through seed. And like I said, we weren't able to really do it until we were about 5 to 6 years into the project because there was no soil. Not enough soil to actually for these to grow. And the native shortgrass is critical to the project in that without the native shortgrass, invasive weeds will destroy the project. So it's critical to the survival of everything at the site. I wanted to share some examples of how this work gets exhibited because, yeah, as I was speaking, it's an unusual type of art practice, but then we do have formal exhibitions of this stuff where we get asked by museums, oh, can you have a show? And then we have to interpret pieces of our art practice into the museum space. And so, and we do that. We're very active. We're active in exhibiting this work around the country. This was at the Museum of Contemporary Native Art, and some of the things that we've gotten into are botanical presses, almost something that you would kind of see in botany. Is a lot of the work, the way that we document the work in a visual art form. But then the trash is a big part of it. We exhibit that. We have different ways of engaging the community. This is one of the projects that we did years ago, and we brought it out all over the place, all over the country, but its base was Phoenix, Arizona when we started it, and it's called the Mobile Eco Studio. But it brings DesertArtLAB basically to a mobile form. Yeah, the Mobile Eco Studio. Another piece of work that I wanted to share is the cyanotype process we use, where we grow all these plants, we grow all this indigenous ecology, and then we create prints from them through a cyanotype process. So, and this speaks to the kind of kincentric philosophy that Enrique Salomon gets into, and that, there's this idea that we're kind of removed from ecological systems, and he really studies how we're a part of it. And so these prints are kind of an exploration of that as an art form. And you can see we grow all the botanical samples that we create these large cyanotype prints from. Let me see if this will work. And the origins of cyanotype are botany. So the cyanotype process was established by botanists about 200 years ago. That's how and we did this project as a part of that Mellon Fellowship at Colorado College and the Colorado Fine Arts Museum. And these are part of the Colorado College Fine Arts Museum's collection, which they're going to be having a show that includes these in September. I'm going to show a couple more examples of different things, how we activate that space, and then we'll have questions. Water and land performance, this was also part of that fellowship, and this was a collaboration with folklorico dancers here in town. And what we did is we had land dancers and water dancers, and we collected water from the river to bring up to the site. We're right above the river to establish the next stage of planting. And the idea was is we feel like there has to be kind of cultural practice around our ecological practice, and so this performance piece was a way to engage that with our local folklorico studios. This is images of this as a video project in the museum space in Colorado College, Fine Arts Museum. And then I'll try to play some clips of the video. follow water use in Colorado, but in Colorado, for many years, up until about 5 years ago, water collection systems from your roof were illegal because the water's not yours. Somebody already owns it. So for us, it was about reclaiming that act from the M.F.A River, which was the name before they gave it to Arkansas, and to hydrate the land so we could continue that conversation with regrowing healthy native indigenous landscapes. The other thing I wanted to do is do a shout out to Colorado College. We've been able to have a collaboration with their Southwest Studies program, which they're awesome, great group of folks over there, and also some of their ecologists. So currently, their ecologists are testing the soil of our land and then the road next to it to try to see the changes in soil composition that have happened over the last almost 10 years. And so a lot of Southwest Studies students come through the site, and it's also their science students. But the last thing I wanted to leave you with is, as we went through this journey, we kind of were thinking about this stuff, we were doing it, and we would come across scholarship as we went. It wasn't all laid out for us. So it's when you're doing this kind of practice, it'd be hard to have that. So you're making the projects, and as you go, you're learning, related scholarship and folklore as you go. And this is one of the pieces that we found we came across in central Mexico, and it really made us feel like we were on the right path. And this was probably about halfway into some of the projects, right before we established the field site, the actual work site in Pueblo. And I'll read it to you. And this is a Huehue Tuapoli, which is words of the ancient elders. So when we think about, and these are really important to us, because when we think about ecological systems, and we think about, kind of philosophy, a lot, and especially in academia, oftentimes the Americas isn't included in that. And so when we came across this was like, okay, this is tied to this land, this story, this ecology. And that was important to us as artists and thinkers. So act, take care of the things of the earth, do something. Work the land, plant cactus, plant agave. With that, you will have something to eat, to drink, to wear. With that, you will stand, be true. With that, you will walk. With that, they will speak of you, praise you. With that, you will be known. And then the last thing I want to do is, if anybody is interested in more information about these projects, there's a book called Digging Earth, which a scholar from CSU Pueblo, Rachel Zimmerman, she might be here, she's an art historian. She wrote an article about the contextualizing this work in this piece, and then recently a publication called Artists Remaking Medicine came out, and one of the projects in the book is it features our site here in Pueblo, and it talks about Pueblo, and it talks about kind of the unique context of the environment that we work in here. And I just wanted to, and that's it. I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Matt, thank you so much. I have a question.
Okay.
So I understand what you're saying about the process of your art healing the land that you're on. How would you say it has, in a personal connection for you and your family, have you found it to be a healing process in some way?
Well, I think ecological practice is health, right? And so when we started getting into this work, I was like a visual artist. I was making art that discussed healing the earth through visual art. But I was like, that's not enough. We actually want to do it. We actually want, as artists, to do it, not just show images of it. And I don't think I ever really understood it as healing myself throughout the process. But I think there's no doubt the metaphor, when you think about concentric ecologies, is we are the earth, right? So no doubt when we do bring these ecologies to a healthy state, you are in some way changing as well. And there's no doubt about it. Yeah. So, yeah.
I'm Gregory Howell. I'm wearing two hats Chicanx today won the Pueblo Star Journal, and we were fortunate
Yeah.
a year and a half ago
Yeah.
to write a beautiful article, and if you'd like to, Nico Grayson wrote that.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
But I was intrigued by two different things, and I teach here in the University in Media and Entertainment, and I'm actively involved in the arts. And I was fortunate to work with Demaria and Terrell in Japan many years ago. So if you haven't traveled down there, it's pretty amazing. And Rodon Crater right outside of Flagstaff is pretty extraordinary. But you use the word performance in really unique ways. And in the art world, we talk about installation art. But I loved how you use that, and especially with the project that you did in Phoenix, where you asked people to come, and then they would take the cactus with them, and then you asked them to participate in this performance. I want you to talk about that. And then the other thing is, and it's true of just the art industry, as you become more and more famous, museums want you to bring your things into a museum. Yeah. How do we reverse engineer that and change the way the museum is, so that your particular process is actually the museum itself? Because it is so interactive, it is so unique to the land.
And that's a tougher question, because it does become about resources. We can only be, that this is a very intimate project, believe it or not. I mean, you just see cactus and people drive. A lot of you have probably seen it and not even known. And that's kind of the point. It's not in your face, but it takes a lot from us as artists. And I think it would be very difficult for a museum to have artists, like they'd have to be on that site, or they'd have to like hire a whole, crew to maintain something for decades. And that's the tough part. There's a lot of spaces that are like, oh, we would love you to do a show here for a year or two, but when you start getting into these long projects that are 30 years, it's like that's not happening, Obviously, there are some examples. There are institutions there's a really famous land art project in Iowa. I'm forgetting the name, but they're taking it out. They're just de-installing it after 25 years because it's so hard to maintain, they just can't do it anymore. So they're de-accessioning the project, and people are real disappointed that they didn't maintain it, but this is one of those kind of institutional things. And but I can tell you, when we started doing this work over 10 years ago, the land art and earth art projects had already kind of come and gone. So they weren't really in a place to even exhibit it in any way. Like there was no opportunities at traditional art institutions to have this discussion. That changed about 5 years ago. It started to really, more artists started doing it. And so they started kind of catching on. But, and it was kind of like, well, land art's from the 60s, it's from the 70s, and it's over. But actually there's a bunch of artists still doing it. So it's not over, so that it's a larger conversation, it is more difficult. And we've had those with institutions. For us, we want to be here. We want that project here. And if it's at an institution that's not related to the context of our work, it's not the work, And the process is everything. That the art is out there when Colorado College is there with their students, when our CSUP students are out there, when we're trimming those cactus. And I'm telling you, it's a ton of work when we're picking weeds. that is the practice. And so then that comes into the performance. And so when we go back and we think about fluxism, it's the everyday, and it is life. And how do we frame it and mediate it? And what we did as Chicano artists is we didn't see ourselves in those conversations. Where was our life? We didn't exist. We didn't exist in those discussions. But did that mean I can't do that kind of art? We did not agree. We did not think that. We thought, well, we're gonna do the work that we want to do, and these discussions have opened up this whole new space for us to continue to look into. So the performance part goes into that fluxism part. And there's another term that Joseph Beuys from Fluxism came up with called social sculpture. And this was the idea that as artists we can shape social space, we can shape social experiences, and that's art. And again, I was a student at one point, and I said, well, I want to do that. I want to do that as an artist, and that's kind of that. But I also wanted to see my story. I wanted to see a future. into to reality because we think it's ecological based.
So this may be a silly question, I'm not sure. But where does xeriscaping play in this?
So I think when you think about contemporary water use and landscaping, you have a thing called xeriscaping, and then you have, and I'd say in a way it's ornamental. And that doesn't mean it has to be, but it can be a way of saving water and having something good to look at. And that's fine, that's cool. We believe in systems. We believe that ours is, you know, some of you might think it's ugly, you know? Because systems aren't always perfect. And there are definitely times where the site is, you know, it's not like trimmed up, and that's not what it's supposed to be. I think when you get into xeriscape and landscaping, you're talking about the decorative side of this conversation, which is, I'm all for it. I think that's great. But yeah, I think, you know, it can be related in a lot of ways, and I think it's a great practice. But I think when you do xeriscaping, also I think sells this thing that there's not a lot of labor involved. You know, you kind of do it and you're like, yeah, it's good. Obviously, that's not true. This is crazy labor intensive, really labor intensive. Is it as labor intensive as grass though? Yeah, and that's, I didn't have a slide on grass. I usually threw a grass slide in there. I missed it, but that was also a big jumping off point for us. Grass in the Southwest. You know, you're in this desert land, dry. We gotta have a lawn. You gotta have a lawn. And I'm not trying to. If you have one, my family have them. They're beautiful. But where is that value coming from? Where is that? That's an aesthetic. Where is that value? And we said, oh no, we're not having a lawn. We're doing as messy as it gets. We're going indigenous ecological systems. And again, as an artist, we can do it. If I was just doing this to just, you know, it's a lot. It's a lot. But I still think grass takes more labor, more oil, and more chemicals. Chemway, right? Chemway. Did you know that word? There's a.
I'm sure you know this, but we depend cactus for our existence today. Our ancestors would go through the prairies and light all the prickly pears on fire in extreme drought years, so they would have feed for the livestock. And I remember hearing those stories.
Yeah, and when you dig into research on prickly pear, a lot of the research comes out of Texas universities, and it's for livestock feed. So this is the tough part, is that we have 150 cholla cactus. It's a little farm, you know, in a way. It's a little perennial agricultural site. When I call the extension for, when I have an issue, they don't have any answers for me. You know, the farm extension. In fact, one time I called and we were having an issue with a bug, and I still can't find any research on this bug. If anybody's an ecologist and wants to get into it, there's a thing out there that's not studied, which is really kind of the cool thing if you're into this. But I called them and I asked them, and they said the only questions we ever get here about cholla cactus are how to kill them. Yeah. And that is also part of the project, is that we're framing that in the center of town, we're honoring it, so we love it. And that is us. That hard cactus is us, especially in this community. It flowers 2 weeks a year in June, so it got done a couple weeks ago, but it's incredible when it flowers. It's only 2 weeks a whole year. Yeah.
Matt, I have a question about whether your beautiful approach to the healing and blossoming of the desert might be applied to the struggle for water rights. When I was a teacher at Vineland Middle out on the Mesa, we used to hear stories about how the Hispanic American farmers and the Italian American farmers and the Anglo-American farmers would all fight with each other to get allotted irrigation water and pull dirty tricks on each other to steal it from each other. Is there a way that your project might bring some healing or a positive solution to help these men get along with each other and get the water that they need?
We've gotten questions like this all over the country, and sometimes people say, how can you bring this to market? We are not the market people. We're cultural practice people. So everything we do is about cultural practice. We don't sell any of this stuff, and I think that's where the water battles come, right? They need water for farming, and they need to produce a certain amount to create a lifestyle. And we would have to have a major shift on how we think about agriculture. And I don't think that's impossible. There are cactus farms around the country that are commercial. Most of them are in central Mexico, and they're like 4,000 years old. I'm not kidding. People have been living in the same communities, growing on the same land for 1,000 years, and they sell it. And they sell it to places like Walmart. Walmart puts it in your tortillas. So, I mean, there's a market, but yeah, we have to, this is also something we get into, is tasting. What does it mean to eat sustainably in the dry lands? What does that taste like? You're going to be eating choya, you're going to be eating prickly pear, you're going to be eating calites. We have an array of food at our site. You can't get it at a grocery store. There are some farmers markets where you can get it across the country, but it's rare. So, we'd have to really rethink about how we eat, what we think is what our tastes are, what our idea of beauty is, because a lot of people think it's ugly. Of course we don't, but it's a system that's so beautiful. But when we're in a place where grass is the standard of beauty in a garden, we have some places with some growth to be had. But I think with the water, limitations on water, will probably, in a lot of parts of this country, they're going to get there probably before us. We have a pretty close water source. So, but if you go south of us, yeah, they're starting to really deal with a lot of issues with water restrictions. Arizona, southern Arizona. I mean, they're depending on a source that's running out. Southern California. So I don't know if that's an answer, but.
All right. Oh, we have one more question. One more question. Last question.
Do you do any community education around how to grow in your yard or cook or?
A lot of our programming is tied to art projects and to higher education. So most of the program we do, when we do work with community members, it's usually university students, either from CSUP or from Colorado College, although we're open to it. We're not a nonprofit. This is an art project, so we don't have regular programming. We do stuff though, and so sometimes a lot of our projects do bring in community members, and we've done everything from we got a poet, the New Mexico poet laureate, come and do she came and wrote a poem just for the site last year, and we had Juan Morales was there. He read a poem, and we do things, but it's not a nonprofit where we're doing regular programming. But yeah, we're open to it. Well, thank you all. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. So we are at our lunch hour. So if you would like to go ahead, take a stretch.